for at least the last year, I've been borderline obsessed with watching documentaries that have to do with the 80s. The 80s at the heart, so that could stretch back into the late 70s and into the 90s. Basically, you could say I've been really obsessed with the period of time that I was alive in the analog world. And I kind of just assumed that there was some sort of nostalgia. I was just indulging nostalgia. I'm reaching middle age, so I'm yearning for my youth or something like that. And I was watching this documentary called VHS Lives, which is about these people that are really into VHS. They never really got into DVDs. They stayed with VHS, and it's entirely about horror films and B grade, C grade, D grade horror films on VHS. And I realized when I got to the end of it that I wasn't completely relating to these people. And what I mean by that is, if it was really nostalgia, if I was really craving something from the past, then I feel like I would have come out of that with a sense of companionship with these people, comradeship. And I didn't. I just found it an interesting documentary, and it triggered another feeling in me that I couldn't put words to. And then I think it was 2 days ago, I was watching another documentary on Amazon called Eye of the Beholder, which is about Dungeons and Dragons artists. And when I got to the end of that, I was sad. And I didn't really understand why. I mean, I didn't play Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid. So why did this make me sad? And it took me a while to start to unravel it. I think it has to do with the way that we exist now in our social interactions, particularly online. But because of the online world, most of this stuff extends into the rest of the world. The way that the online world works, it's everywhere. You're watching something on television and they want you to tweet. But because of that, our identity is always tied to the significance that people other than ourselves place on it, the value they place on it, or at least the context with which they give it. But when I watch these older things, or things about older times, what I'm missing, that sadness, is a sense of loss. And what I'm missing is this sense of independent identity. For people who don't know, I'm 42 years old. So when I was about 11 or 12, which would have been like 1989 or somewhere around there, I never really was into Dungeons and Dragons. Just wasn't really my thing. But TSR, the company that made Dungeons and Dragons, also got into making Dungeons and Dragons type games, role-playing games for comic books, specifically for Marvel comic books. And I was really into Marvel comics. So I would go buy these books, kind of like the Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual, or the scenario books, which are like these thin little pamphlets, like 5 or 6 pages. I would go buy these, but they would be, instead of Dungeons and Dragons characters and fantasy scenarios, they would be comic book scenarios. You're the Avengers, and you're going into battle against this villain. I didn't play these games. In fact, I think I have one of them right here in this cabinet. And I would never play these because I was an only child, so I didn't really have anybody to play these games with. But I would buy them because of the pictures, and because there would be like information about the characters in there. And I was just really into that. I used to buy a lot of the Who's Who, if anybody knows what that is. Like you would buy these books and it would tell you all of the characters and who they were, what their powers were. I was really into that. Yeah, see, here's one of the TSR books. This is the Judge's book. Marvel Superhero Judge's book. And I would just flip through these. And I didn't know anybody playing these games. I didn't know anybody playing Dungeons and Dragons as far as I know. I never played the games. But I was really into it. Because I had this independent identity. It wasn't in the context of others. I wasn't into something because that's what people were into, or because it was trendy, or because my friends were doing it. I was into it because I was into it. And that was it. That was my thing. So I would go and I'd buy these books. And I would fantasize and create stories and draw characters and just get lost in that world. And I think going even deeper on why this makes me sad is because even now, when for example, I have this palette over here, and I threw down a coat of yellow paint on it the other day. I haven't painted in like a year. And I threw down a coating of yellow on it. And then I started thinking, what am I going to put on there? And in thinking that, I began to think about the process of sharing it. I was already taking this idea that was solely something that existed inside of myself and putting it into the context of others. Now, of course, I'm not saying that this is always a bad thing. I'm just saying that what I've been missing is that feeling. That feeling of security in my fascinations, in my curiosity. I've been missing that sense of independence. And I think it's why so often I start something and then I find a way to disassemble it, or to break it, or to challenge it, or to push it, or to rename it. I have one part of myself that is seeking validation, seeking context, while another part of myself is seeking independence, rebellion. So what I've been working really hard on is finding a way to balance those. To balance those impulses, to use them. What are things that I like sharing? What are things that flourish in the context of other people? And what are the things that only grow independently? The things that, if you expose them to too much light, they wither like plants that aren't supposed to get that much sun. And finding those and separating them is a very difficult thing. That's what I'm doing right now. That's what my winter is dedicated to. My winter is dedicated to finding my context and finding my independence. So I put out episodes when I feel like it. I try things like this, little mini solo episodes, because I have something to say and I feel like recording it, and I do it right on my phone because why not? I might even throw some music under this. I'm using the Anchor app, so the music is included. I didn't write it or create it. But allowing myself these two phases and finding a way to let them exist, maybe not harmoniously, it's a word we overuse, but to allow them to swim around each other, to allow them to flourish independently of each other. So this is I think I've been trying to figure out what I'm going to call this, because I'm obsessed with naming things. Part of me wanted to call these monologues, but that seems so pretentious. That's part of the reason that I wanted to use the phone, because it makes me feel like I can't get too caught up in the perfection of this. So I'm going to call it something, a word that I hated for a long time, but something I'm learning to accept: a selfie. This is a selfie. If you like the other episodes, don't worry. Long conversations will always be the center of this. But I don't know. I'm going to try filtering these in. Or maybe I will get to the end of this, listen to it, decide it sounds like shit, and delete it. Or maybe I will record this and never do it again. I don't know. I just listened to former guest and my friend Colin Frangisetto has a new podcast out, which I can highly recommend, called Cosmic Nod. And at the beginning of his first episode, he was kind of musing similarly to this about, what am I going to call this? Am I going to keep doing things like that? Do I want to consistently do things the same way all the time? Yeah, I felt that. I felt that when he said that. Because I know that struggle. Because that context that we're always trying to put ourselves in, it wants us to be easily categorized. It wants us to be easy to label. If we were CDs, nobody really wants you to be something that you can't place into an easy category. Mr. Bungle, where does this go? Is it rock? Is that pop? No, it's not pop. Is it jazz? No, it's not jazz. And that's why, for a long time they created the label independent or alternative. Because it was like, those were the buckets where you could just throw those type of things. Like, where's this go? All right, throw it in there. I want to be in that pile. I want to be in the pile where you go, it's not rock, it's not blues, it's not jazz, it's not classical. Guess I'll put it in this miscellaneous pile. I want to remain miscellaneous. So, if you dig it, hey, you can say hello to me. This Anchor app allows you to send voice messages, but Twitter, Instagram, whatever, shoot me a message. Say hello. That kind of stuff flourishes in the context of other people. I just dropped a paintbrush. I guess it's time to end this. You guys can support me on Patreon if you want. And the Twitter and the Instagram are at Random Badassery, which I actually just recently added my name to. It's not just Random Badassery, now it says my actual name. I'm taking my identity back. So, hopefully you enjoyed this. If not, it was short.